When a murder is discovered,
Boston 911.
I need EMS.
lives are torn apart.
The loss of Mariah was devastating. She was such a positive person. People absolutely loved her.
And here is our women's champion. Get up for more.
This was a tragedy. A family and a community was forever destroyed by what happened.
It's up to the police to track down the killer.
There was a jealousy aspect and 3 people involved.
Your vehicle was seen next to her house.
I needed to keep an open mind about things and hoping that I could just connect the dots and solve this crime.
The suspect responsible for this murder fled the country.
Meet the murder detectives who reveal how they caught the killer.
The killer planned the event and then tried to cover their tracks.
Digital forensics provided the missing puzzle piece.
To be able to walk and stand over somebody after you've already shot them twice and you shoot them a final 3rd time, it was just complete evil.
These cases don't necessarily make me think that everyone is bad, but it does open me up to realize that people do have a limit, and everyone, once they're pushed to that limit, they will make irrational choices, and they might hurt somebody. And the acts committed here were pretty disturbing.
I'm Detective Richard Spittler with the Austin Police Department, and this was my first assigned lead investigator case on a homicide investigation.
A lot of the homicides that we see here in Austin are related to drugs or robberies. This one received a lot of media attention, and it was a lot bigger than what we're used to dealing with. My name is Timothy Price. In May of 2022, I was assigned to the homicide unit with the Austin Police Department.
My friend is staying with me, and I just walked in, and she's laying on the bathroom floor, and I don't know what happened. I can't tell what happened.
Is she awake?
She's not awake. There's blood all over her face, all on the back of her head.
Is she breathing?
No, she's not breathing.
I received a phone call from the on-call sergeant saying there has been a murder. The only information is that there's a female that is deceased inside of an apartment, and there's no suspect.
The first responding patrol officer advised a female had been found, and she had injuries possibly consistent with gunshot wounds.
Officers on scene identified the victim as Anna Mariah Wilson.
Commonly known as Mariah or Mo, detectives discovered that the 25-year-old was from out of town.
Mo Wilson was an extremely talented young woman. She actually was a professional cyclist. She was pursuing her career after graduating from Dartmouth College with a degree in engineering. She was able to get a sponsorship and was really at the top of her game.
The victim had traveled from out of state to compete in a bicycle race, and she was staying with a friend in the apartment at the time of the murder.
The owner of the apartment arrived home around 9:55 p.m. and she called 911. She attempted to conduct CPR to save Mariah's life. She was visibly upset. I could tell that she had been crying, and she still even had blood on her hands from trying to save Mariah's life. Her friend had told me she has an electronic door lock on the front door that would indicate if the door is locked or unlocked. She showed me that the electronic lock was unlocked at 8:36 p.m., indicating that Mariah arrived home at 8:36 that evening. At this point in the investigation, I'm trying to figure out a motive. Why is Mariah dead? The way that it was described to me was that everyone really liked Mariah, that she never had issues with anyone. And so I asked her friend, is there anything missing? And the only thing that she could mention was Mariah's bicycle, a very valuable and expensive race bike. The only thing that really lines up is that this potentially was a robbery gone wrong. Maybe Mariah walked in on a burglary in progress and she was killed.
We walked up the stairs to the apartment. We noticed that there were no signs of forced entry, and the female decedent was located in the bathroom area. You never get used to seeing a deceased person, especially one that had their life taken from them by somebody else.
There was no signs of a disturbance. There was nothing knocked over, nothing really out of place. I noticed a cell phone and a laptop. These are very common items that would have been taken, in a burglary. These are very easy items to grab, but those items were still there.
We observed 3 fired shell casings that were in the immediate vicinity of Mo. A firearm had most likely been used. We just weren't for sure of any circumstances that occurred before then.
I noticed that there was a tile that was missing from the floor, and there was a bullet that had been recovered from that one single tile. And it appeared as though that she did have a gunshot wound to her chest that lined up directly with this broken tile. This told me that whoever killed Mariah, that they stood over her and they shot directly into her chest. This was not an attempted robbery. It wasn't a burglary. This was somebody who targeted Mariah. This was somebody who went into that apartment and their sole intent was to kill Mariah.
I was notified by one of the patrol officers that a bicycle had been located down the alleyway and appeared to have been concealed partially in some bushes. So I went to inspect the bike, and it did look like a very expensive racing bike.
I wanted to be very, very careful with this bike because I believe that this bike had to have been removed by the person responsible. Our crime scene technicians, they wrapped the bike up to preserve any sort of DNA evidence that might be on it.
Hoping to identify a suspect, officers canvassed the neighborhood looking for surveillance footage.
One of the people in the neighborhood, they sent me 2 hours of continuous footage from a doorbell camera. As I was reviewing this footage at 9:15 on the video, that's whenever I started hearing what sounded like a scream. And it was a female screaming. After that female scream, I heard 2 gunshots. And then there was a 6-second pause and I heard a 3rd and final gunshot.
We did also find some video footage that showed a vehicle in the alleyway, and it appeared to be driving very slow near the entrance of the apartment. The vehicle was identified as a black Jeep, and it had a very distinct roof rack and what looked like a bicycle rack on the back of it.
This black SUV, it's pulling up and slowing down in this alleyway right next to the front door at 8:37 p.m. The electronic door lock had indicated that Mariah had entered into her residence at 8:36. Unfortunately, because of this bike rack, I wasn't able to see a license plate. Also, because of how dark it was outside, I couldn't tell who was driving the vehicle.
With the evidence indicating that the killer targeted Mariah, investigators wanted to find out more about her personal life.
A victim's cell phone can be absolutely critical to a homicide case. Text message communications, call logs, even web searches can provide a clearer picture of what happened. My name is Daniel Portnoy. I am a detective with the Austin Police Department Digital Forensics Unit. Our motto is Data per Veritas, which roughly translates truth in data. We're looking to get true data and unbiased in the eyes of justice.
Detectives found that Mariah sent text messages just hours before her murder to a contact named Colin Strickland.
We ended up doing an online search, and Colin Strickland, he was found to be a professional cyclist that lives in the Austin area. And he was well known in the cycling community.
Colin Strickland was most likely the last person to see Mo alive. In these type of investigation, the last person to see the victim alive is usually the first person that we want to talk to.
My thought was, I'm going to introduce myself to him and basically make this like a death notification. And I was going to see what his reaction to it was. And if there was anything that stood out to me, I was going to ask him to come to the headquarters and give a formal statement. Whenever I approached, I saw Colin working on bicycles inside of his garage. I introduced myself to him.
There's really no easy way to say this, sir. So apparently last night she passed away. Okay. And right now it's an open investigation, but it is being investigated as a homicide. Okay.
Colin was very taken back. He seemed shocked.
Detectives observed a black Jeep in the driveway that had a roof rack and a bicycle rack, and it looked a lot like the one we observed in the video circling the crime scene.
I started asking him about his evening, and he explained that he ended up picking Mariah up on his motorcycle, and that he drove his motorcycle to a pool and then ate dinner, and then drove her back home on his motorcycle and dropped her off. But during this conversation, he mentioned the motorcycle so many times that it really stood out to me. And so I was thinking to myself that it seems like you're distancing yourself from this black Jeep, because I have this black Jeep on camera. And so I told him, said, can you come to the headquarters and give me a formal statement? He agreed, and whenever he left, he got into an older model Cadillac. Again, making me believe you are further distancing yourself from this black Jeep because you don't want to be associated with it at all, because this is what you were in last night. At this point in the investigation, I believe that Colin is being deceitful. You know, he's lying to me, and he might actually be the person responsible for killing Mariah.
Early on in investigations, police have to be careful with what kind of information that they give out. According to the autopsy report, the official cause of death for Anna Mariah Wilson was homicide, and the injuries were gunshot wounds. The most important thing to me when covering any violent crime is to make sure I'm personally, as a journalist, not doing anything to make things more difficult for the victim or their loved ones. My name is Brianna Hollis, and I am a crime reporter with KXAN News in Austin. We knew that Anna Mariah Wilson was a professional gravel racer, and she seemed to be somebody who was just absolutely so well loved in her gravel racing community. And given how much this community really seemed to respect and really adore Wilson, she seemed like an unlikely victim.
Colin arrives to the headquarters, and he reiterated to me they went to the pool, went out to eat, and they went home.
When speaking to Colin Strickland, he seemed to be very cooperative, and he seemed to answer all questions to the best of his ability.
He really talked very highly of Mariah, said that she was an incredible racer, and he described her as being the best cyclist in the U.S.
We learned that he briefly dated Mo, but at the time of the murder, they were just friends.
As the interview went on, investigators were able to retrieve CCTV footage from the restaurant Colin visited with Mariah.
In the surveillance footage, it appeared that they were laughing, having a good time with each other. We did indeed find video that showed Colin and Mariah both on Colin's motorcycle, indicating to me that he was telling me the truth. The only thing that I could really think that happened was maybe there was some sort of an argument that happened throughout the evening while they were out, and Colin just became angry. He became enraged and potentially turned back around after dropping her off, confronted her about it, and then he killed her. I asked Colin if he owned any firearms. Colin said yes. He owned a 9mm handgun. This matches the same caliber of cartridge cases that were found on the scene of the murder. While I was speaking with Colin, a search was executed at Colin's residence by other detectives. They located 2 handguns.
Once we're able to secure a firearm or a weapon that we believe is involved in a murder, we will submit that item for testing. In this case, we located the 3 fired cartridge cases at the crime scene, and we submitted them for a test to compare that firearm to those fired cartridge cases.
With suspicion against Colin growing, investigators questioned him about the black Jeep in his driveway, which matched the vehicle seen on the night of Mariah's murder.
I mentioned to him that he had already told me that he drove his motorcycle with Mariah that evening. And then I told him that I saw him driving this Cadillac to the headquarters, but the black Jeep was the one that I was interested in. And I asked him, who is it that drives that car? And he said his live-in girlfriend, Caitlin Armstrong, owns that Jeep and that she's the only one that drives it.
Caitlin Armstrong was a resident here in Austin and lived with Colin Strickland. Some of her background included teaching yoga.
Caitlin Armstrong got into cycling through her relationship with Colin Strickland. She wasn't as competitive in the sport as Wilson and Strickland were.
Colin said she would race, but nothing on a scale of what Colin or Mariah would race on. These were more amateur races. References that he was kind of making seemed like he didn't hold her to as high of a standard as what he did for Mariah. I found that very interesting, seeing that he had just told me that him and Mariah are just friends, while he is in a romantic relationship with this other female that didn't seem like he thought very highly of.
I really love her. I just have been not convinced that there's like that I'm want to be like life partners with her. I would kind of feel like we'd be better business partners and friends, and she's a wonderful person, super helpful to have around and really sweet. So it really hasn't been like a thing that's felt, there's no like screaming or yelling or anything like drama.
Colin described their relationship publicly as long-term and serious, but it was off and on.
During a relationship break with Caitlin 7 months earlier, in October 2021, Colin met and briefly dated Mariah.
Colin had showed me his phone during this interview, showed me the messages sent between him and Mariah. I found that Colin changed Mariah's name to Christine, and I asked him why. Colin said it was because Caitlin didn't really like Mariah, and it would cause arguments if she knew that he was speaking to Mariah. Colin had even mentioned that he would delete text messages from Mariah so that way Caitlin wouldn't see it. With Colin thinking so highly of Mariah over Caitlin, it seemed as though she could get jealous of that. She would get angry. There is somebody else that her boyfriend that she lives with seems to admire more than herself. I finally told him Caitlin's Jeep is seen on video cameras right as Mariah is walking in. Colin was very taken back by this. He was very shocked, and he ended up putting his head into his hands.
Being very distracted. triggering.
And that's whenever he finally came out and he said, well, I purchased 2 firearms, one for me, one for Caitlin.
Investigators wanted to determine if Colin was telling the truth or if he was trying to cover his tracks.
GPS data showed that Colin's phone was not at the murder scene at the time of the murder. And it showed that he did not stay long once he dropped Mariah off.
What we also found was that Colin received a phone call at about 9:07 that evening from a friend of his, and his friend ended up confirming that this was Colin that he was speaking to. The phone call lasted about 8 minutes. And he hung up the phone at 9:15, which is the same time that gunshots could be heard on the doorbell camera. This proved to me that there was no way that Colin could have been involved in the murder.
I did notice messages coming from Colin to Mariah, and the text messages looked to be very sanitary. Looking through it, you can imagine the emotions of the sender or the recipient of that text message. But as a digital forensic examiner involved in the technical realm, I'm certainly detached from what's happening. That's why it's so critical for lead detectives, such as Detective Spitler, to put everything together in context.
One of those text messages was sent from Mariah to Colin. Mariah seemed to try to get some clarity on her and Colin's relationship status. It seemed as though she believed that they were involved in a romantic relationship. It did appear as though he was leading Mariah on, and he was never very clear with how their relationship had ended, or if it was even over.
There were also previous messages between Colin and Caitlin that appeared to be showing jealousness on the part of Caitlin in Strickland's interaction with Mariah. That may imply that there was some kind of friction going on.
Now, my focus is mainly turning on Caitlin. But it's still very early in the investigation. I don't have any evidence.
News soon spread that Colin Strickland was being interviewed by police.
Colin Strickland was definitely well known in the cycling community. Cyclists here knew who he was, and he had a big social media following. We knew that he was connected to this case. There were a lot of rumors and theories that there was a romantic element.
There was a possible love triangle and 3 people involved.
In any investigation, the media interest, it gets the message out to people. And that can definitely help because it can bring us different tips. One of those tips indicated that they had a discussion with Caitlin at an after-party event, and that Caitlin had just seen Mariah. Caitlin was furious. She was shaking. The caller indicated that Caitlin told her that she wanted to kill Mariah. And of course, the caller thought, you don't really mean that. Caitlin, though, she said, no, I really want to kill her.
Have we all said something like that before in a hyperbolic and absolutely non-serious way? Yes, but when they heard that Wilson died, that comment immediately came back to them to such a point that they felt compelled to tell police about it.
It was appearing to police that the motivation and the cause of the death of Mo Wilson was this apparent love triangle that existed between Colin Strickland and these 2 women that he had dated on and off, Mo Wilson and Caitlin Armstrong. All of this led police to think this is a person that's got motive.
It was found that Caitlin had an active warrant, and she was arrested on a Class B misdemeanor theft of service warrant. She was transported to the headquarters to where we would be able to conduct an interview.
Did you hear about what's happened over the past 24 hours?
Colin walked in the house and said one of the women in the second community passed away.
Yes. Yeah. While Colin was talking to us, your name came up. I think that there's probably a lot more to it that you could help explain.
Okay, I'm not sure exactly what you...
Caitlin was very calm. She didn't respond too much.
Your vehicle was seen next to her house. That kind of makes it look not too good, right?
She wouldn't confirm that it was her vehicle. She wouldn't deny that it was her vehicle.
Is there any explanation as far as why the vehicle would be over there?
Instead of her saying, I can tell you exactly where I was, I can tell you what I was doing, she just sat there. Very emotionless, very calm, and eventually she ended up terminating the interview.
An apparent error on Caitlin's arrest warrant meant that police had no choice but to let her leave.
After speaking with Caitlin and Colin and looking at all of the evidence as a totality, it did appear that Caitlin was responsible for this murder. But at this time, I still don't have enough evidence to say that she did commit it.
The community held a memorial ride for Wilson. People were absolutely devastated. She clearly had made a mark not only on the sport, but on the people involved.
Six days after Mariah's murder, detectives received the results of the firearms testing.
It was found that one of the handguns that was located during the search of Colin's house was the same handgun used to fire the rounds that were on scene of the murder. There were only two people that had access to this firearm at that time. And I know Colin's whereabouts, but what we don't know is Caitlin's location. Our tactical intel unit took control of locating Caitlin Armstrong. The only problem was that she was gone. Nobody had talked to her. No one knew where she was.
She deleted all of her social media accounts and hadn't been heard from.
Definitely seems suspicious since we had spoken to her and she knew that we had completed a search warrant on her residence and possibly found some items of evidentiary value there.
Austin PD Tactical Intelligence Unit scoured the streets of the city for any sign of Caitlin Armstrong.
They began really searching for Caitlin's car. There was a CarMax that was nearby Colin and Caitlin's residence. And CarMax confirmed that she had sold it to them for not too much.
Caitlin's vehicle was installed with an infotainment system. This infotainment system, it kept GPS records on it.
This module is the infotainment system that Detective Spittler was able to take out of Caitlin Armstrong's Jeep. I was able to take the system apart and take out the memory chip with the GPS data.
Investigators zeroed in on May 11th, the night of Mariah's murder.
The GPS data showed the vehicle circling around the block area where the murder took place. And finally, the vehicle stopped in an alley near the murder scene at about 8:40 p.m.
Caitlin circled this area for quite some time. And then finally, Caitlin's vehicle stopped right here in this lot. And we no longer received any GPS signal from her vehicle, meaning that the vehicle probably was turned off at that time. About 15 to 20 minutes later, the signal reappeared. It was in the same exact location, according to the GPS signal.
The vehicle left the scene at around 9:17 p.m., which was a few minutes after the murder took place. Extracting the data from the infotainment system completed the puzzle of Caitlin Armstrong's movements before, during, and after the murder.
As the evidence against Caitlin Armstrong grew, investigators were now desperate to locate her.
Colin had said that he hadn't talked to her, he hadn't reached out to her, he didn't know her whereabouts. He indicated that Caitlin does have a sister named Christine who lives in New York. We found out that the day prior, her sister's passport was used to fly from Newark to Costa Rica. We had to send officers to New York to find out who was it that boarded that plane. Was it her sister or was it Caitlin? They went to the airport and collected video surveillance from there. Caitlin is seen on camera walking through the airport, and she doesn't have a whole bunch of luggage or anything, but one thing that stood out in that video was that she's carrying a yoga mat.
Investigators found that Christy had no idea that her sister had taken her passport. With Caitlin Armstrong now a wanted fugitive, federal authorities elevated the investigation to major case status.
This case is now assigned to the Lone Star Fugitive Task Force. A task force made up of officers as well as U.S. Marshals. And now they are the ones responsible for locating and apprehending Caitlin.
That is when it really started to get picked up by a lot of national media.
Police have intensified their search for the Texas woman wanted in the murder of pro bicycle racer Mariah Wilson. Investigators are looking into the possibility that jealousy may have been the motive.
Shortly after the police interviewed Caitlin Armstrong, it was pretty clear to her that her goose was cooked, and she knew that she had to get out of town fast if she wanted to essentially evade the murder charges that were coming down the pike.
While U.S. Marshals made their way to Costa Rica, investigators in Austin looked for evidence in Caitlin's digital footprint.
I found multiple photos of Mariah that were saved to her iCloud account. I found that Caitlin had a deleted folder. In this deleted folder, there was an address, and that address was the address of the apartment that Mariah was staying at.
Detectives analyzed the fitness app Mariah used to track her bike rides in the hope it would reveal how Caitlin got the address.
On May 11th, Mariah went on about a 2 or 3 hour bike ride. That bike ride was recorded on Strava. Through the Strava maps, it showed that Mariah's bike ride started at the bottom of these stairs. It also showed that she ended her ride at the bottom of these stairs. Caitlin viewed that ride, and she was able to see exactly where Mariah had stopped and started her ride.
Evidence showed that Caitlin was cyberstalking Mariah in the lead up to her murder. But with Caitlin still missing, there was a chance that she would never be held accountable.
Caitlin had created a new Google account. I found that she had made several interesting searches. Some of those searches included her Googling herself, her own name. She had viewed news articles about herself regarding this case. Those indicated that she was on the run and that she was wanted for murder. And another search that I also found very interesting was if pineapple juice can burn your fingertips. All of these searches really indicated that she had no intention of turning herself in.
Following the brutal murder of world-class cyclist Mariah Wilson, U.S. Marshals tracked their prime suspect, Caitlin Armstrong, to Central America.
Caitlin thought that she would never have to take responsibility for the murderous rage and the jealousy that she showed when she killed Mo Wilson.
Based on all of the information that we had gathered, we knew that she had flown with this yoga mat. So potentially she could be trying to become a yoga instructor as a form of income to begin this new life. The U.S. Marshals created multiple ads looking for a yoga instructor. And Caitlin reached out to the ad in Santa Teresa. They learned that Caitlin was actually working at a local hostel there. The deputies approached her and acted as though he was looking for directions. But what he really was doing, he was trying to determine if this was in fact Caitlin Armstrong.
She looked a little different hairstyle and different color, and her nose looked a little different.
It appeared as though she was trying to conceal her true identity to continue to evade capture.
Confident they had found their fugitive, US Marshals alerted local authorities, and Caitlin Armstrong was taken into custody.
Caitlin initially gave the name Ari, but eventually she confirmed that her true identity was Caitlin. After she was arrested, it was found that she had been staying in one of the rooms at the hostel. We found a blue jean jacket, which appeared to be the same jacket that she was seen wearing at the airport. We also found her sister's passport, as well as her own passport. And we found a receipt for surgery that had been completed while she was there. This surgery, it was for a nose job.
One of the first acts of business she did was get plastic surgery done to alter her looks in the quickest way possible.
After 43 days on the run, Caitlin Armstrong was captured in Costa Rica, transferred to Houston, and now this morning sits behind a jail cell in Austin facing murder charges.
I was very excited to be able to give some sort of closure to the family and let them know that she was going to be held responsible for the crime that she committed.
Caitlin Armstrong entered a plea of not guilty, but her next move indicated she was anything but.
So weeks before the trial, I was monitoring the calls throughout the city. One of the calls, the Travis County Sheriff's Office had a prisoner that had escaped from custody from a hospital in South Austin, and this inmate was currently on the run.
The fugitive inmate was Caitlin Armstrong. She had been in hospital receiving treatment for an alleged leg injury when she escaped.
She continued running, and eventually she was captured about a mile away from where she had initially escaped from. I was shocked. It was not something that I was expecting to happen, but also a very valuable piece of evidence because it indicated that she was guilty.
The evidence that we had against Caitlin Armstrong was pretty damning. We had the fired cartridge cases that I located at the scene that came back as a ballistics match to the firearm that was located in her residence. We had the DNA from the bicycle that came back as a very, very high likelihood to have come from her. And we had the GPS from her black Jeep that showed her circling the neighborhood and then stopping near the apartment right before the murder occurred.
This was the first time that I had personally come face to face with Wilson's family and her friends and her loved ones. Seeing them and seeing the real pain that they were feeling, it was rough.
On day 4 of the trial, Colin Strickland began his testimony.
Colin Strickland said that on May 11, 2022, he did not tell Caitlin Armstrong that he was spending the day with Mo.
I believe that Caitlin thought that Colin wanted a romantic relationship with Mariah. Colin appeared to also lead Mariah on, and Mariah questioned the status of their relationship constantly up until the time of the murder.
Caitlin Armstrong was known uniformly to be a very jealous and explosively angry person. She was very distrustful of men, and this included Colin Strickland. And jealousy is one of the oldest motives in the book.
So after the trial, we're waiting on a decision from the jury. I was very nervous. I was worried. I know for a fact that Caitlin did this, but did I do enough to prove to 12 other people that Caitlin did commit this crime?
If you allowed yourself to actually know her, you never, ever would have wanted to hurt her. This never would have happened. You and Colin could have had a beautiful life together. You destroyed that.
Listening to Mariah's family speak, it was very powerful. They had even told Caitlin that if she would have just reached out and just spoken to Mariah, told her that she was in a relationship with Colin, then Mariah would have understood. It didn't have to come to this.
Caitlin Armstrong was very stoic the entire time. She kind of just had her eyes forward the whole time, emotionless.
Caitlin Armstrong was found guilty of the murder of Mariah Wilson. I felt that justice had been served. I felt that we had a good investigation, we presented the evidence, and the jury made the right decision.
Caitlin Armstrong, it seems like, she was friendly at one point. But she had a different side to her. And people would describe how she would become so enraged with anger that she would shake. To be able to stand over somebody after you've already shot them twice and you shoot them a final third time, it was just complete evil.
Based on the evidence, I can only describe Caitlin Armstrong as a cold-blooded killer. She was jealous of Mo, and she killed her in cold blood. Mo had the chance to go on and possibly be one of the greatest gravel racers ever, and now she won't be able to do that, and her family has to live without her.
Personally, as a crime reporter, I cover a lot of homicides, and Mo seemed like one of just the most innocent people there could be.
The Mariah Wilson Foundation, every year around the time of Mariah's death, holds an annual bike ride. Mariah was a brilliant, young, very talented athlete, and her entire goal was to inspire other people. And by creating this foundation and doing these rides, it continues what she wanted to do.